Hello and welcome to another episode of the Winging It F1 podcast. I think this is episode 54 and it could be one of the shortest ones we have because we're basically doing it just because Lewis Hamilton has finally announced that he is staying at Mercedes for the 2021 Formula 1 season and it's just a 1 year deal. Wow, I know, shock. With me to talk about it, as usual, is Freddie Coates and Adam Dickinson. How have you been over the last few days, guys?
Yeah, good. I had a good first day of uni, and then this news lands out of nowhere. But yeah, he's not resigned, as a lot of news headlines have read. But yeah, it's very interesting, and I'm looking forward to getting into it.
There are a lot more talking points now that we've got an announcement rather than prior to it, which is not always the case. It's very intriguing to why we have so many questions still about this Hamilton-Mercedes relationship. I'm quite good as well, by the way. Thought I'd throw that in there.
I'd say there's more talking points, but not as big.
Yeah,
like
there's not as many answers.
Yeah, but the big question of will he be racing has been answered, which I think was,
that's true,
at least to me, the main one.
Yeah. So we finally got the deal after months and months and months of talks and rumours and news about Hamilton. Actually, I better not get into some of what I just thought of. Are we surprised? Are we?
I am now. What have you thought of?
Shouldn't have asked that.
Oh no.
There was an article last week in a certain newspaper about Hamilton and
was it Racing News 365 or whatever it is?
No.
Written by F1 reporter. Yeah, I think I'm disappointed actually. What I'd hoped is that we'd get to Bahrain in April or end of March, and we still wouldn't know, and they'd have had Van Dorn doing testing, and Hamilton would just be around the paddock wearing neutral gear and he'd missed practice, and then just at, I don't know, 11 or between FP3 and quali, then they'd oh, by the way, Hamilton signed a contract. I'm kind of disappointed that it's happened now. I think it's kind of a weird middle ground where they could have cleared it up ages ago and it would have been fine, or they could have kept going right up until the 11th or 13th hour and it would have been brilliant. So yeah, it's a shame, really.
I know what Adam means about the fact that it's kind of it could have been so much. It could have been even more fancy and fun. They could have messed us around even more. But also, if nothing had been signed, there's Valentin Orishny, who writes for The Race, wrote a fantastic article about why fans want him to sign and don't want him to sign. Because a season without Hamilton, we spoke about this in an episode we did a week or two ago about how then it could be a Bottas clinging on to a title hopes from Verstappen or a Russell year, and you saw all the craziness that went down immediately on the Monday morning before the Turkey Grand Prix when there was an opportunity for George Russell to race that weekend. And a little bit of you kind of thinks, oh, this could be really fancy and cool, but also you just don't want there to not be the best driver on the grid. You want him to be there, and I think the fact that, as Adam says, it's come at a kind of bang in the middle, kind of worst time. They can't mess around with the publicity anymore. They can't, because it just raises questions for a lot of it, like we've said, apart from the fact that he's going to drive. Why is it 1 year? Why is there no option, etc.? And which we'll get to. And it's too late in terms of just to make it normal. So there's so much that's gone on that's going to raise more questions and make it seem a stranger relationship than we've come to know for Hamilton and Wolff, particularly for the past 2 or 3 years, which has been, one of the best partnerships between team boss and driver I can remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, why do you think it is only 1 year then?
I think Lewis is keeping his options open because the rules are changing, and we've seen in the last rule change from 2013 into 14 that can just rip up the hierarchy. And if he thinks Mercedes are going down the same path that Red Bull did in 2013, where they're going from the dominant, multiple consecutive world championships to one of a decent way behind the front runners, he doesn't want any part of that. So I think over the course of this season, he'll be checking in with Mercedes progress. Obviously, I think ideally he wants to stay with them if he thinks they can deliver a winning car for 2022 and beyond. But I think, we having conversations up and down the paddock, and, every team, even Red Bull and Ferrari, who've got their kind of future number ones locked in seemingly, I think every team on the paddock would, if Lewis wants to talk about driving for them next year, would be happy to have that conversation. So I think that's the case, that he's keeping his options open, and if he doesn't think Mercedes can offer him a winning package for 2022, then he'll ship out.
So it's not retirement; he'll move teams, is what he said, if Mercedes aren't delivering.
I mean, he could retire. I think it's a possibility, and I guess that might depend how the talks go and whether he wants to continue. But I think, just generally keeping his options open so that, he doesn't end up marooned next year.
What do you think, Freddie Coates?
Well, age is just a number in sport, really, at the moment. You look at Hamilton, talk about the fact, he's 36, he'll be 37 next year. If he signed a 2-year deal, he would be knocking on the door of 38 by the time he finished, that kind of thing. And that doesn't really mean anything in my eyes to any of it, because I think Hamilton is at his best. I think he's got better and better and better, and there's no reason why he shouldn't continue to get better, unless we're going to find out a lot more about how badly he got COVID or something. But that didn't really seem to have affected what Lance Stroll for 2 races and Perez for 2 races, and that's about it. So in terms of them getting back on their feet and back to full strength, so I don't think that's going to come into it. I think it just seems to be, like Adam says, keeping his options open. I don't think it's keeping his options open competitively, because I think Hamilton has full faith in Mercedes. I think Mercedes have already mastered one rule shake-up in 2017 and won every championship since then. I think if there's any team you'd have faith in to master another rule shake-up, it would be Mercedes, because they're the ones who have mastered the past 2, if you count the V6 turbo hybrid one as well. So I think he would have full faith in the team. I think it's more just faith in himself, his own personal beliefs catching up with him a bit, and he's obviously got so much going on outside the sport. I wouldn't be surprised if he's looking at the global picture a bit more, and the environmental scope of traveling around the world for not for like as safe as it can be environmentally, if that makes sense. Because there were pictures released of him recently in LA. He's got his Porsche Taycan, his electric Porsche. He drives around in electric cars all the time. He's make sure everything in Mercedes is done with like wooden pencils and pens rather than plastic and that kind of thing. And it's whether he just wants to negate his footprint whatsoever. And I wouldn't be surprised if that comes into a lot of it.
I mean, personally, I think they've done a 1-year deal just to do some kind of deal because they can't agree. I feel they can't agree in terms of length of contract. There's so many factors, including the COVID factor as well. The world, it doesn't look like it's going to get back to normal, at least for the next 4 or 5 months, probably a lot longer. So
the world take ages. UK maybe 5 or 6 months. The world though, less so. We saw if anyone follows politics, everything with vaccines is going well in the United Kingdom, but everywhere else it seems to be a little bit touchy still.
Yes, the vaccine program is going well.
Well done, Nigel, on your vaccine.
I think they've done a deal just for the sake of it almost, and then come up September, October, they're going to see how things are. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Mercedes have got one eye on Verstappen, and by that I mean Verstappen over Russell, because there's a lot of talk about George Russell replacing Hamilton possibly in the future. But I really think Mercedes want Verstappen, because I think Verstappen is he's going to be the best driver in the sport for the next 5-10 years, possibly him and Leclerc
15
at least. Yeah. Whereas Russell, there's still that small uncertainty, I guess. So I think Verstappen is a factor for Mercedes.
I do think yes, he might have full faith in Mercedes, but you know, there's a difference between having full faith and it being certain. And we've seen last night Tom Brady winning at Super Bowl, his 7th Super Bowl at 43. He could have stayed at the Patriots and he would have been nowhere near the game. Instead, he's moved out. And that's a dynasty that has been dominant far more than Mercedes in F1. I think, every team in every sport is dominant until it isn't. And, while we've seen what Mercedes can do and how they can adapt, that is all in the past. And, there's 9 other teams out there who can potentially make a better job of it. And I think having his options open and being able to jump to another team, that could be a career-defining move. And if we see Mercedes going back down the field, a bit like he did with McLaren, where it seemed like a really ridiculous decision to move to Mercedes. Well, not really ridiculous, but it seemed like the wrong decision, or a leap of faith. And it's paid off handsomely. I think there's the same element here, that for me, I think he'd be foolish not to consider that, because every great dynasty does fall eventually.
I just don't see him moving to another team. We'll see how the year goes. I can understand the argument that he's going to want to win, and Mercedes will stop winning. Mercedes are going to stop winning at some point, but I think Mercedes are more likely to stop winning if they lose Hamilton, rather than Hamilton will stop winning with Mercedes. That's just how I see it. And I know everyone looks silly for saying, why is he leaving McLaren? Mercedes are 5th and McLaren are 3rd. But yeah, McLaren were in front row lockout for the last race of 2012, and Mercedes were out, not into Q3. So that was a gamble. That wasn't a good, at the time, wasn't considered a good move. And I just think it would be, to now, if you take all of the facts, it's good to stay at Mercedes. And I think, yeah, like Nigel says, it feels a bit like they pushed a problem to September rather than now.
Yeah.
And that could just be from Stefano Domenicali coming in and banging some heads together. And I really think that's probably more likely than them sitting down and taking a step back, because they would have taken a step back in December, because they'd almost agreed on a new contract in August. So they've been pernickettying, that's now a word, about all of this for nearly as long as the contract is itself. So I kind of think there's going to be more of a debate between Hamilton and Mercedes than Hamilton and, I don't know, Ferrari, say.
But at some point, Mercedes won't be winning.
You're right, but I think
everything they've done in the
5
past,
years from the line than 1 year from the line.
But it will be, at some point we'll be saying Mercedes is going into the season, they should be dominating. We think they're going to be on top. We think they're going to be competitive. And as good as Hamilton is, if the car's half a second slower, he can't do anything in the championship. So, yeah, I think we probably will never know the answer, but or we might years down the line. But
15
I think for
years,
me,
he's going to release a book.
But I don't know. I think for me that would make sense from the competitor's standpoint that he is.
I don't know, but I think in terms of options, I think the option Hamilton with this 1 year deal, the option is retirement or to stay with Mercedes, depending on who his teammate is. Because I don't see him wanting to go up against Verstappen and possibly even Russell. Possibly, although I think
if he doesn't want to go up against Verstappen or Russell, he's not going to move to Red Bull. He's not going to move to Ferrari to go up against Leclerc. He's not going to move to Alpine to go up against Alonso. Maybe he could take Stroll in Aston Martin, or Vettel in Vettel. He could take Stroll, but I can't see him avoiding Russell and then going somewhere else to avoid that, because there are still threats everywhere else.
Ricardo, Alonso, Leclerc,
so on.
I can't see him avoiding a teammate though. I think he backs himself. He's clearly proven over years of beating good teammates, world championship teammates, that he does have the standard. I think if it was a complete toss-up 50-50, then that might sway it. But I think he'd back himself to go in and be able to beat whoever he's alongside, because that's his mentality, and he's backed it up with performances.
I would
Yeah,
disagree.
I
with
buy that
personally.
more. I buy it more that this is, I think I buy it more that Hamilton isn't going to run. He's a fighter. He will fight whoever he's given to fight, and we saw that to the last race, to the last a magnificently slow sector in Abu Dhabi 2016, where he kept trying to back off Rosberg into Vettel, and Hamilton's going to fight whoever's there, and I think we speak so much about relishing the fight, and you see that Hamilton the happiest when he's come out of a race and he's beaten everybody. He comes out of a race sometimes, he's like, yeah, it was a good race, thanks for the team, and that's a race that he's won by miles. You see him when he's absolutely pumped, and it's a race like Spain. Damn it, I cannot speak. It's this race like Spain in 2017 where he passed Vettel on track to take the victory, and I just always remember the radio message he gave through that race. Where he's absolutely out of breath. He's pushing and pushing and pushing a track that you've really got to heave the car around, especially in the heavy cars they got now. That when he won that, the beating, another great, just completely pumps him up. And I think, as Adam says, he's gonna want to decimate Verstappen. He's going to want to decimate Russell in the way that he has done with Bottas, and that's why he loves Bottas.
I mean, personally, I don't think Verstappen wants to go up against Hamilton either. I think they both.
I think it's worse for Verstappen to go up against.
It's not just a Hamilton thing. I think all the top drivers wouldn't like to be in the same team. Personally, I feel so.
It's definitely an easier ride, but
I think I can see him wanting to back out if he doesn't feel like he's going to be competitive. The package that he's getting going into next season wouldn't be competitive, and he's kind of going to have 2 years winding down in the midfield, or kind of fighting for the third spot on the podium. I can see that if he doesn't feel like him and the team going into 2022 being capable of winning a championship, that he might think, actually, what am I going to gain from this? But kind of rebuilding your team takes a few years. He may have a few more years, we don't know, but I think that would be a factor. But I just think if he's a 7-time world champion and he doesn't want to go up against Verstappen or Leclerc or Russell, that just doesn't kind of fit with me, I think.
Yeah,
Michael Schumacher would have been the same, don't you think?
But they're different drivers and people.
Yeah, they're all different people. I mean, if you look at Alonso, he's when he left Formula One, it was because he couldn't win in Formula One. That's fair enough. So he went and won somewhere else. He went and competed elsewhere, Dakar, Indy 500, WEC, Le Mans, etc. He did all of that because he's a driver, he's a competitor, he's a racer. Hamilton is all of that for Formula One, but there's so much more to Hamilton than there is to the racing for Hamilton, and that's why I'm thinking about all the other alternative parts of his life. There's such a big part of this in all of the statements they've gone on about with Toto Wolff that they've organised, for Beyond. What they've organised this year is a racing deal for Hamilton for 2021. Kaput, done, cool, tick. But what they've organised Beyond is so much more with the Hamilton Commission that's being set up at the moment, so much more to support Hamilton's beliefs. And I think that's a Beyond with Mercedes. That's a commitment to Mercedes and Hamilton between the two of them. So the question then is, does Hamilton want to stop racing but carry on working with Mercedes for all of these diversity programs, all of these ecological programs? And I think that puts half a nail in a coffin for me for his racing career for 2022, but not for his ambassadorial career.
Okay. Yeah,
I think
those are good points.
The only other thing I'd say is kind of thinking back to when Jenson Button left Brawn, obviously Team Brackley, to go to McLaren, and he said that was because he kind of the meetings he was having with people, and he saw Mercedes was coming in, but they weren't kind of bringing their expertise in. It was going to be kind of a sponsor-funded team for the next season, and that's kind of why he didn't feel, like he was able to go on. I think that might be another thing, if Mercedes pull out, or
with Ineos.
yeah, if there's kind of a reduction of backing or something like that, the financial situation changes, which, this year more than any other, is a possibility. I think that might be the other kind of thing that's weighing on his mind.
The financial backing is, I think, at Mercedes probably the most secure that it's ever been, because they've got a discount of 250 million quid to what they spent the past 2 years. So, I mean, like you say, with Button and Brawn had no money to develop the car in the first place, so they weren't going to be competitive for that year. So they weren't going to be competitive for 2010 anyway. So Hamilton's at least got the security of it's still a third Mercedes, it's now a third Ineos and a third Wolf ownership, and I think Mercedes obviously still putting their name on the ticket, and I think like I say, I think it's more Hamilton push than Wolf push. Wolf did say in an interview that he wants it to be a 2-year deal because he doesn't want to do it all again. He's had a few.
So both Mercedes drivers, Valtteri Bottas and Hamilton, are out of contract at the end of the year. So what do we think the lineup is going to be next year?
Bottas and Russell.
Yeah. Oh, that's it.
I think so. I think based on what I've said, I think Hamilton's going to announce a retirement and do a farewell tour. I don't feel comfortable with. I'd rather, once he says he's going to leave, he should leave, because back of your mind, that kind of thing. But it's like, you don't want it to be anything bad happen after you've already said this will be your last one, etc. But I kind of think he'll do a farewell kind of tour and have a big send off.
This is a difficult one. So Russell has to be in. Like, he's either got to be in or he's leaving the Mercedes program.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's just not a good move to cut him off when you've got Bottas, who isn't in the top echelon of drivers, and Hamilton, who's 37, going on 38 for 2022. Maybe I've got that wrong.
No,
but yeah, I think Russell and Hamilton, like, it just seems the most. I think there is. Yeah, I think Russell's more nailed on than Hamilton, I'd say. But I think I just kind of back the competitor in Lewis and in Mercedes to be able to, be willing and able to go forward and fight for potentially a 9th world title and 9th for Mercedes too. Yeah. So I think that's it. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Russell and Bottas. I think I'd be surprised if it was Hamilton and Bottas again.
Well,
that's interesting.
As usual, we've got to be all be different on this podcast, so I'm going to go Verstappen and Russell.
That would be really exciting.
Actually, no, Verstappen and Bottas. No, Verstappen and Bottas. I think both are possible. Verstappen and Bottas also.
So if it was Verstappen and Russell, would that be them bringing both of them in and just doing a shootout to see who they want to keep on? Because that's not a long term.
I think Russell will be the number 2. I think Russell will be number 2.
Really?
In my opinion, yeah.
Based on driver skill, I think personally that's what would happen. But I think they would. I think you've seen with if you had those two, I think Russell would fall to number 2. But we've seen so much with Mercedes how much they adore having a pleasant working relationship in that team. They are so scarred still by Rosberg and Hamilton trying to.
I think it'd be a Rosberg and Hamilton situation. If you get that,
if it's Russell and Verstappen, they're going to want to do one over on each other every single practice lap, and you're going to lose more than you're going to gain with that. I think that.
I mean, I mainly say that because I don't think Verstappen will stay with Red Bull. I think
that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, although I guess again it depends how he thinks they're shaping up for 2022. If he thinks they've nailed it,
depends if they have an engine.
Well, yeah, I mean there is that, but I think it is a reset, and in many ways we've got to start from zero, and it could be any team or any of the top teams with kind of backing and competence that could come out of this on top. So I think I can see Verstappen staying in and looking at that.
Yeah. All right. Last point. Just going to backtrack a bit. So out of Hamilton and Mercedes, which party has won with this 1 year deal? Do you think?
There's a lot of caveats to this. I'll let Adam go first.
I think Bottas and Russell have both lost. That'd be the first thing that I'd say. Out of those two, I think Hamilton wins because he gets a tilt at a very achievable 8th world title, and he gets the chance to dive out at the end of the season if he doesn't think it's going well. I think Mercedes, I think they do win, but kind of not as much as Hamilton, because Hamilton is, if Hamilton wasn't there, Mercedes still have a decent chance at winning the world title and winning 2 world titles over the season. Whereas obviously if Hamilton isn't there, then he doesn't have that chance. So I think it's a positive for both, but I think Hamilton wins out of it. Obviously we don't know the finance and stuff or all of that side, but yeah, I'll go Hamilton.
I think it's kind of like a half win for both. In the half win that they've got Hamilton in the car for a year, and the half win for Hamilton that, as Adam says, he's got the get out if he wants, and he's clearly got his point across to make it a 1 year deal, because there's clearly some niggles there. I disagree on the Bottas Russell point. Adam says that that's a loss. I think in the short term, medium term, it gives Bottas and Russell more opportunity to have a world championship under their belt for 2022, to at least fight for it without a Hamilton in the car in the other side of the garage. Because I think you could say, yeah, maybe this year they'd do it, but I think, it's incredibly unlikely that Hamilton wasn't going to be in the car. And I think if you look at what everyone was talking about, was either a 2 year deal for Hamilton or nothing. And I think for Bottas and Russell to have that opportunity potentially for an opportunity to lead the Mercedes team in 2022 into a new era, that's going to be a win for them.
But if Hamilton doesn't sign the contract this year, I think it's even less likely that he comes back in 2022. So I think Bottas and Russell have both lost a chance to fight or kind of be favourite for the title this year, and also Hamilton's still at the team, he's still in the sport. I kind of think.
But for Bottas, if Hamilton had stayed more, then Bottas, I think, would have been out and Russell would have been in. But this gives Bottas an opportunity to stay for 2022, outstay his welcome, and then have another chance then, if that makes sense. If Hamilton then walks. It is reliant on a few things.
So do you see Hamilton taking this year out and then coming back into Mercedes for 2022?
I really have not made myself clear, have I? I said no. Hamilton's obviously got a contract for 2021. If he walks at the end of 2021, that's it. Hamilton's out. And that means a Bottas-Russell lineup and an opportunity for both of them to lead the team then in 2022 and beyond. That saves Bottas's career potentially, because I think if Hamilton stays for 2022 and does a second year from what we're talking about now, signs a new contract, a new 1 year deal for 2022, then Bottas would be out and Russell would be into that seat at Mercedes, and it would be a 2022 Hamilton-Russell lineup. But I think Hamilton's going to walk at the end of 2021, which means I think it's going to be a Russell-Bottas lineup, which means it's a win for Russell and Bottas, because neither of them have to go up against Hamilton, and they can lead the Mercedes team much easier if need be.
So you
Adam's
think they win
point
because
was that it would have been this year it would have happened a year earlier, basically. Bottas and Russell.
So are you saying
it's
they
still a
win
win,
because
but
it's
later down the line?
Are you saying it's a win because it's 1 year rather than 2?
Yes.
Okay. I was viewing it as if they hadn't signed.
If it's a no year, it would still be a win, but a 1 year is still a partial win. If it's a 2 year, it's a loss.
Oh, thank God, that's cleared up.
In circles.
That makes sense in my mind.
I think they genuinely both win. Hamilton wins because you can see how he feels, whether he's still the best number one driver or not, and Mercedes get to see the same as well, whether Hamilton is still able to go on for a few years. If not, they can bring in Verstappen as early as next year. So that's how I see it, I think. Yeah. Any other points?
No,
No,
not really. I'm
Right.
glad
It's
to see
got-
Hamilton back though.
I am.
I think-
I'm Formula
too.
One wins.
It would have been an amazing championship if Hamilton wasn't in. It would have been a genuinely intriguing title fight,
Still could be.
Yeah.
but it won't. But seeing Hamilton racing again, I think that's a win for the fans and getting to see that, and one more year maybe becoming the outright championship holder. I think
We're learning to savor him as we watch him. A lot of people have blocked Hamilton in terms of like, oh, he wins all the time, it's boring. But we're learning to savor one of the greatest Formula One drivers of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. Both great points there. So you get to see Lewis Hamilton for at least another year. I completely agree. I think it's great for the sport to have arguably the greatest driver of all time around for another season. That's it for this podcast. Thanks for listening to it. Check out our last two episodes where we talked about whether Hamilton is the greatest British sports person or not. And if not, who is? Apart from that, we'll see you next week or next time.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.